Friends, welcome from downtown Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Stories from the Center. I am David Blackman. We believe a podcast can facilitate helpful and holy conversation concerning justice, freedom, and peace. These are real concerns for the Fayetteville community, especially as our city continues to navigate our history, our present realities, and our future possibilities. Participants will reflect on what justice means, the connection freedom has within our community, as we are uniquely positioned to our neighbors at Fort Bragg, and the desire to live together in peace. Through seeking the stories of our people, we will find and celebrate the places where justice, freedom, and peace intersect and inspire listeners to practice the same. The question that we ask all of us, including the listeners, when telling your story, how have justice, freedom, and peace impacted your life? So friends, today we welcome Reverend Frederick Culbreth, who grew up in Twin City, Georgia, under the loving and watchful care of his parents, Reverend Isaac Jr. and Mrs. Christine Culbreth. And I thank God in the community of Lewis Chapel Missionary Baptist Church here in Fayetteville, where Reverend Culbreth was licensed and ordained to preach the gospel under the direction and guidance of his father in ministry, Pastor Dr. John D. Fuller Sr. Friends, in April of 2019, Frederick became the senior pastor at First Baptist Church on Moore Street here in Fayetteville. First Baptist, I didn't know this, is the oldest missionary Baptist church in Fayetteville. Married to Tracy for 23 years, they are the proud parents of Megan, Morgan, and Madison, and the proud grandparents of a granddaughter, Jordan. Prior to arriving at First Baptist, Reverend Culbreth served as pastor of the second New Light Missionary Baptist Church in St. Paul's, North Carolina for 6.5 years, where he also served as president of the Pastors and Ministers Conference of Union Missionary Baptist Association. He's a 2019 recipient of the Rhythm of Gospel Pastors of Excellence Award. Reverend Culbreth retired from the military in 2012 as a senior warrant officer after 21 years and 9 months of honorable service to his country. In 2008, while Frederick was a chief warrant officer at Fort Story, his family was named the Armed Services YMCA of Hampton Roads 5-star military family for the Army and the Fort Story Family of the Year. Of course y'all were. The Culbreth family were actively involved in life on post and were recognized for their overwhelming volunteerism in the community. During his military service, Reverend Culbreth continued his formal education, graduating from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, with a Bachelor of Science degree. He holds a Master of Divinity from the Campbell University Divinity School in Bowies Creek, North Carolina, just up the road from us here in Fayetteville, and he's currently pursuing the Doctorate of Ministry degree at Campbell. Frederick, it is a joy to welcome you to the program today. I am grateful as we've been sharing coffee times down at Root Awakenings every month. It's just a pleasure to have you come by and want to just give you a chance to say hello.
Great to be here, Pastor Blackman. Thank you, and thank you to the church for having us to be a part of this podcast. And I've been looking forward to having this conversation. Of course, we've been enjoying downtown Fayetteville together, looking forward to the spring and the great things that are going to happen as we continue to serve God and prepare to prayerfully go back into worship sooner rather than later.
Amen to that.
Face-to-face worship anyway,
Amen
sooner rather than later.
We've both been talking about that. And to give some context for folks listening, wherever they're listening from, I've been joking that this past week it feels like yellow snow is falling all around.
Oh,
us.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
really heavy
Pollen.
really heavy pollen. But we're grateful for your presence here today, and I'm just really thankful that God has led us to be together in these conversations we've enjoyed with really since George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And that brings us to this first thought today. As we come together in this place, this sound studio that Justin's created for us here in the gym at Hay Street, this morning, a few hours ago, opening statements started up in Minneapolis. And we have been blessed, I've been blessed truly by the conversations we've shared together, Frederick, and trying to lean into this current reality for Fayetteville, some of our history, and then certainly what could be for the future. Mm-hmm. And I'd love this to open up with maybe a story of justice, and however you can help us to enter into this space today. Let's talk about that first, if we could.
When we talk about justice, I think about the fact, when I think about my childhood and how I was raised, justice is really allowing right to be right. And that's how I was raised. Right is right, wrong is wrong. I wasn't raised necessarily that it had anything to do with the color of my skin or where I was from. It was just wrong is wrong and right is right.
I like that.
And so that's justice.
Sure.
That's justice.
Frederick, can you talk to us a little bit about your upbringing? And you've shared a couple stories with me about Twin City, Georgia. Give us an idea where that is in Georgia, and just maybe what life was like there for you.
Twin City, Georgia is located in southeastern part of Georgia. Actually, I'm not even from Twin City. I'm about 5 miles down the highway, off the highway, about 3 or 4 miles down the dirt road from Twin Cities. So I'm from the backwoods of Georgia, southeast Georgia. If anyone has ever heard of, most people have heard of the Georgia Southern Eagles, great football team. We're about 30 miles south of them. So we're in that Statesboro, Augusta, Savannah, about 30, in between all three of those around there somewhere. Twin Cities is a very small place. I don't think we have a name brand, not even a name brand convenience store. Everything is it's mom and pop. So and we have one signal light and one caution light, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, truly small town America. Small town America.
Small town.
Growing up with a father who was a pastor, right is right. Did you experience or watch within that time of being shaped and molded? Is there one story that just sort of sticks out for you, Frederick, about learning that right is right?
I don't know if there's one particular story, because it was just something that was in every direction that I turned, for the most part, when it came to how you treat people. From, as you know, I was raised on the farm of my paternal grandfather, which I was raised by my parents, but we lived on my paternal grandfather's farm, and my maternal grandparents lived only 5 miles. We were divided by 5 miles of dirt road, and they were farmers as well. Actually, my grandfathers used to farm together. So, dealing in situations like that, the stories that I remember most about, justice are things being like they should be, is that, one good turn, deserves another. People just treating each other right and being upright and above board. And I saw that, a lot between my grandfathers. They would help each other out with their farms and different things like that. And one would do this and another would turn and do that. So I saw that a lot in my upbringing.
So that family connection was a really important part for your families
Oh,
being
yeah.
so close to each other.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. As justice is on the mind of many today, and as we've talked about what happened here in Fayetteville, what is happening here in Fayetteville, and then thinking about what's happening in Minneapolis today, and so many people sort of being caught up in this idea of justice. Frederick, do you see that there is a hopefulness of us as a community, as a nation, as a global community, that we understand that and that we're getting better with respect to being right is right in the world today?
I have to be honest. I don't know if we're getting any better, and I don't say that likely, but I say I don't know if we're getting any better. But what I do know is that if we allow justice to be justice, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now.
Okay.
Justice, as I began to describe it, and that's the way I describe it, is right, being right. Justice is you treat a person according to how they should be treated, or whatever the circumstances are. You shouldn't have to have a certain amount of influence to be treated justly. You shouldn't have to have a certain amount of resources to be treated justly.
Sure.
If we would let justice be justice, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we have. You know, you shouldn't be put in a position where, per se, you're not guilty of say a crime. If there was a crime committed and you got blamed for it and you were innocent, you should be able to go to court with whatever the resources are and be found innocent simply because you're innocent, not because you have enough money to tie up the legal system, to turn over enough rocks to prove your innocence. You should just be innocent because you're innocent. And it's on the other hand is you have some who are guilty, but have enough money and enough resources to infuse enough doubt. Sure. That they come away, as being found innocent of something they're actually guilty of.
Sure.
So if justice was truly justice, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we have. I was reading that information. It was talking about when the trial beginning in the George Floyd trial, and it was talking about, one of the articles I was reading was talking about the downtown businesses are boarded up and everybody's kind of sitting in expectation. we've made that problem.
Sure.
Whoever it is, whoever steered their finger injustice has made that problem.
Right.
Because if people believe justice was justice, you wouldn't have riots after a verdict came out, whether it was what people thought it should be or what they thought it shouldn't be, because they would know that it's just.
Sure.
So people, if this game comes back with George Floyd, prayerfully it won't, but more than likely it will. There are going to be protests. And the bad thing about that is when you start messing with justice justice, I believe, can stand all on its by itself, all alone. But when we start messing with justice, that's when we throw things off. That's when we put a cant into it, because now people are not only looking to see if the plaintiff, if the defendant is guilty, but when you mess with justice, then you got to look and see, is the defendant guilty, yes or no? Then, if they are guilty, are they going to be found guilty? Because we've had so many cases where people have been guilty, but they were not found guilty, not because there was a miscarriage of justice or something was left out, something was decided, because that's the way that whoever the powers to be decided, that's the way it was going to work.
Sure.
So.
As we consider all of that happening, and as we both share this role of pastor, righteousness comes to mind, certainly when we hear the word justice. And I find myself struggling in the midst of that in this day and age of, what is righteous? Mm-hmm. How would Jesus help me and teach me and lean into what is righteous in this day and age? Do you find, Frederick, in your work as a pastor, how often does that come up for you, for us in these daily kind of ordinary times that we live in, that we have conversations that may not say the word righteous, mm-hmm. but maybe getting to that point of, well, what's right is right.
Yeah.
Let justice be justice.
Exactly. Same thing. We'll let justice be justice. What's righteous is what's right in the eyes of God. Mm. But where we as people, as I say, human beings, I won't say men, where we as human beings mess up or get things unbalanced is when we come up with our own belief of what righteous is. So, and you can look at denominations, a certain sects of people, and say you can look at two sects of people. One set of people look at the word and read the word as the righteousness of God, and then you got the other set that look at the word and read the righteousness of God, but they support two totally separate things, because they made up in their mind, that they put, one of them may have put the culture, what they see of culture, or how they think things should be, into what righteousness is, and that's not what righteousness is. Righteousness is just righteousness,
right? And what's right by Jesus.
Exactly.
And so that might lead us into this next thought about freedom, because we have the freedom, right? We have the freedom mm-hmm. to interpret, exactly. and have that imbalance of interpretations of mm-hmm. what's going on. So how does freedom come into this? Is freedom separate from justice? And that's one word with maybe multiple meanings. But where does freedom come into this for you, as we have those folks who have the freedom to choose on what's right?
There are many places around the world that do not have the freedoms that we have here, in America. For all of our problems and all of our issues, I mean, it's still, I believe, one of the greatest places one of the greatest countries in the world.
You've said that before to me, absolutely.
But freedom. If we would tie freedom to justice and righteousness, it would lead us to make the proper decisions. What I've seen here more so recently in this year, this past year in 2020 into to now, these past 12 months, has been more of a freedom, really being a freedom to, as you say, interpret as I would or what I believe. Mm-hmm. And so when you have that type of freedom, it's, if you believe that something is not righteous or something is not just, that's what you believe and what this one believes. So freedom really gives us the freedom to have so many different interpretations. But if we would tie that freedom to justice, it would draw us back to the right interpretation.
So yes, right. So, but is freedom? The struggle that I have with freedom right now is it seems like freedom is leading us into all these different divisions.
Exactly.
Like because of our freedoms, we have more and more groups that are saying, "Well, I have the freedom to choose this way. I have the freedom to choose this way." And by having all those freedoms, are we losing a sense of what it is to be a community? And that's what I'm struggling with. I think that's the piece that. How do we help people live into those freedoms, but not lose sight of the comment about you still feel like we're the greatest country to be living in?
It's a thin line for me because you don't want to. You live in a country that taunts freedom, and you don't want to restrict people's freedoms. But how far is too far when it comes to that? Because there are some people who now see themselves as patriots of freedom, who are just outright not good people.
Right.
But they see themselves as patriots.
Sure. So maybe that's the tie, Frederick, freedom to righteousness again, or freedom to justice, is it when freedom starts to infringe on another's justice? Exactly. That might be that's the thin line no longer is thin anymore.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying about if we were to tie our freedoms to justice, it wouldn't be such a big problem. But you're going to take your freedoms to oppress or hold others down or look at other people as second class to you, or you being superior and them being inferior. Well, how can you tie that back to justice? If you were to tie it back to true justice and righteousness, it would level itself out.
Yeah. We got to be careful as two pastors. We might get to preaching here, so we got to be careful. But but I appreciate your thoughts about this. And so go back for me on another thought about freedom. You're a guest that has 21 years, 9 months in the military. Certainly, freedom's a big part of that service.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big part of it. That's why I went into the military. And I'll be honest, last summer with all of the racial injustice and the protests and riots, for me, it was like a powder keg. The things that I saw, you could have people who look at you, could have looked at me or being an African-American male and said I was this or said I was that. And I'm a patriot. I spent 21 years and 9 months. I had to get to the point where, I used to, when I retired, proudly put my flag lapels on, proudly put my retired army lapel on. I had stopped not wearing those things. And then I thought to myself one day, I did this service for my country and for the benefits of myself and my family. So who gets to tell me, what gives a group who do not see me as equal to them, who gives them the authority or the right to say that I'm not a patriot? So I think more people who are really patriots need to start standing up, because even we see when the riots happened in January and it came back and the numbers talking about how many veterans and previous, when you think about that, we're serving there with those same people. Right. So what makes them more of a patriot than me?
Sure. Because
their perception is this is what patriotism is.
Back to freedoms.
Back to freedom.
Back to freedoms again. Sure. But then back to right is right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the struggle right now of trying to figure all that out.
Yeah.
If I'm sorry.
Oh no. Interestingly enough, especially in the Vietnam era, I speak about an era that I've heard some history on, a little bit more current history, with African American males being recruited to go into the military. So you can be recruited and put in the military and put on the front line to lose your life. And that's really been the problem with a lot of African American people when it came to military service, whether it be Vietnam or before that time, Civil War, and all the Korean War and all that, is World War II. You can be recruited to go and fight and be put on the front lines, but you're supposed to be expected to come home and then bow down to a person who could be equal to you. So you're not really a patriot. I think I sent you an article a few weeks ago about how when soldiers were coming back and all the good things that were put in place for them to benefit from, but yet black service people were not given the opportunity. They couldn't even live in those communities that people paid $30,000-$40,000 for. Now their descendants are selling those houses and properties for $200,000-$350,000. But they served just like, And I guess to try to put some credence to that, they were put in positions, cooks or logistics. You got to have all those people too, just as much. But I guess to try to say they're not real, fighters or whatever that's supposed to be. But that's been a major issue.
Sure.
A major issue.
Sure. And in a place where we struggle again in our country of trying, the country that we both claim is a good country to live in, certainly, but we still have so much work to do.
Exactly.
So much work to do. Frederick, as we think about these ideals of justice and freedom, is there a hope for peace? I mean, is peace happening out there, and how are we? How are you shepherding your flock in the midst of a year plus long pandemic now? Are you seeing moments of peace for folks? Are you experiencing that? Is there a hope for peace to come?
I think there's always a hope for peace, especially for those who believe in Jesus Christ and are followers of Christ. We're always looking, and that is our desire to always, have peace. And, like I said, and we talked about many times, last summer was like a powder keg for a lot of people. For me, it was just like constant pressure all the time with, to be in a country who it seems like have come so far, yet to see things blatantly play out the way they do, and really not being as upset much so as just can't figure out or understand why certain things are done, and just like the government in Georgia just basically placed an attack on voting rights in Georgia, and yet it seemed like it would have dawned on somebody, well, let's not make this look too outlandish, but they put 6 white men in a room by themselves signing the bill. I mean, I would advise them, kind of mix it up. I know it's bad enough what you're doing, but 6 white men just basically blatantly show this is where we are on this.
Sure.
So yeah, I think there's peace. There's always a hope for peace, and we always want to try to live in peace. But then again, we have grown to understand that you have to speak up sometimes and allow your voice to be heard, which we call speaking truth to power. And sometimes that causes an unrest.
Yeah.
But it has been civil unrest a lot of times that have caused things to change, to move the needle the little bit that it has moved.
Yeah.
What would we be when it concerning, voters' rights if there had never been a peaceful march on Washington, or, marching Selma, or people marching all over the South? So, we want peace, definitely, but sometimes it causes unrest, in order to try to get justice.
Sure.
You have to make those who hold the reins uncomfortable at times in order to get justice.
Sure. Frederick, I think that's the piece to maybe share with our listeners is if I can here without hurting our relationship. I think that's the piece for you and I coming together, is that the PIECE, that piece of sharing a cup of coffee, of learning and seeking and trying to understand one another. I know that that's offered me hope for peace. Yep. Because you have shared with me stories that help me have a better understanding of the history of the black man in the United States that I didn't learn when I was in middle school or high school or college. And I think when those stories become real for me because of a friend who's willing to share those stories, all of a sudden peace looks different. And a desire to try to strive for that sense of peace, that's, I think, what I've learned from our time together, and certainly look forward to more of that time together. And I hope that our listeners, I think that there's always a level of risk involved. I mean, we didn't know each other. We did some downtown church stuff together, but something led us to say, let's try this, and we did, and I know I'm better for that, Frederick, and I just appreciate you being willing to engage in those conversations, to have the tough conversations that maybe we're afraid to have, but with some trust we can have them.
Yeah, and I don't think that the what seems to be a majority stance against teaching real American history and real black history, more so than has been said, making Americans hate America. I think more so than that, as you were just saying, when we can understand why a people or why a certain group of people is a certain way, or how they view things the way that they do, it helps others to understand the angle that they're coming from.
Yes.
Because I don't believe everyone who has a view different than me may necessarily be a racist person. I actually believe that there's some people who really think everyone is on a even footing, a level footing, when really that's not the case. There's some people who actually believe everyone kind of stands on a level footing, and that's not the case. And that's why you have underperforming schools. They're underperforming schools because they're in what? Underperforming neighborhoods. And the mother who's worked all night,
Right.
or the kids are coming in and the mother's going to work, or so there's not level footing for everybody. And I believe as we grow to understand that, we can grow to understand why we need assistance programs, why we need these other things to try to help. No one is trying to take anything that anyone else has. We're really just trying to give everybody a level playing field.
Build
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
build up.
Which is good for the entire country. It's the same thing I always say about school teachers. I don't understand how we can underpay school teachers when school teachers are the people who are educating the future of the country.
Right.
So I can't see how anybody can make an argument about that.
Sure.
And the same thing with charter schools or schools of choice. That's great.
Yeah.
But then you have some kids some kids who need to go to school and get an education. Yes, they need that family environment around them to help them thrive and develop and grow. But sometimes they don't have that. But at least, at a minimum, every child should be able to go to a good, a high quality school
Sure.
to get a high quality education.
Sure. I've always said, my wife's a teacher, Frederick, and I've always said that as I've tried to invest some energies in my locations as a pastor, and going into a school and try to help kid read, whatever that task might be that's before me as a volunteer. I remember saying to Jackie coming home after one of my first times here in Fayetteville, and she asked me, well, hey, how to go with that moment there with the first graders in Sarah Beasley's classroom. And I said, what struck me, Jackie, that as I sat there with this youngster who's a first grader, who's just learning how to read, is that I want to do my best to help that child read, because you know what, one day, that child may be writing me a prescription. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that child can read and know what's going on, because I want that child to succeed, because there's going to come a day that I can't do for myself. And I want to make sure that these children, these teachers, are supported of teaching this future generation. But they're a present generation that needs to be taught well, that needs to have a peaceful environment to learn in, the freedom to learn and to study as best they can, and that all of those pieces for me are really valuable. They're important because they're a part of our community. That's the fabric of who we are. And if our children are not learning well, then we've all got to roll up our sleeves and find out a way to help those children learn better.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you said concerning young people, children, with all being equal. It's the same thing for this great country that we live in. We look at how far or how advanced the United States of America is. I say the United States of America does not know what it has missed out on, or how much further ahead it would be as a country if we would allow everybody to come to the table. I heard that explained the best way I could have ever heard it explained. Is like, it's not what has been done to hold people down, but really and truly you're holding the country down. You thought that these people who were on the cutting edge and doing great things, well, you had a bunch of them who you didn't even give the opportunity. You've missed out on a lot. America missed out on a lot by trying to hold different groups of people down.
Yeah.
we actually put ourselves behind.
Yeah.
My mama used to call it, what she used to call it, you cut off your tongue, you cut off your nose to spite your face.
Sure, sure.
So we held
Understood.
ourselves down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So missed opportunity becomes limited potential being
Exactly.
realized, because we're not taking advantage of those opportunities, and then youngsters aren't living into that potential.
Exactly.
It's there.
Exactly.
And-
You
and-
got people who they don't grow up in good neighborhoods. They don't have good schools to go to get a good education. So what is their expectancy besides what they see lived out in front of them, whatever that situation may be in their lives or in their neighborhood? every child has the capacity to learn. Some of us have a higher capacity for learning than others, but it doesn't have anything to do with race. That's just, individuals,
Sure.
but the average person can do well given the proper opportunities.
Yeah. Amen. I think the piece, Frederick, you and I have spent lots of time talking about, we can talk about it. We can invest all this energy having coffee together over it. And then it always becomes, so then what's next?
Yeah, exactly.
We talk about all the issues, all the struggles, but now what? And how will we try to live into whatever it is that the Lord's placing on our hearts to be engaged in? And I hope that our listeners, the same thing, as we try through this podcast to have conversations about justice, freedom, and peace. My dream, my hope is that that's leading to action. And that's leading to places where people can be invested in relationships, to go and realize their potential, to try to help folks that may be missing out on opportunities to live into some opportunities that they may not know exist. But I hope that that's maybe a byproduct of this kind of conversation through this podcast. I appreciate you taking the time today to talk about these three topics. Any other thoughts for us to throw out there to give us something to chew on as we wrap up?
It's been great to be here today, as always. Enjoy and look forward to our conversations. And as you said, what comes next. All of us can begin by looking at each other, looking at any person that we encounter as a fellow human being. People come from different backgrounds, different situations. But if we all start looking at each other as human beings, that's why, the second greatest command is love thy neighbor as thyself. If we start looking at people in love, then we will not want to hold back or hold anyone down, but we will all want to try to help each other up.
Absolutely.
Move forward.
Love covers justice, freedom, and peace, especially when we look at that from a biblical lens and trying to follow this Savior called Jesus, for sure. Frederick, I thank you. I thank you so very much. We always thank Justin for our engineering expertise and the work that he does for us. We also give a shout out to our sponsors, the North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church, the Cool Spring Downtown District, and you, the listeners who just make this happen for us. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we hope that you'll share the podcast with others, that they can come to know what it's like to be having these conversations from Stories from the Center. Thanks so much. Be well, friends. Frederick, thanks again.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Enjoyed it.